Welcome. If you crave chilling true crime stories, real mysteries, and twists you'll never see coming, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and join a community that never looks away from the truth. Because every week, we shine a light where others won't. Are you ready? Let's begin. It started like so many teenage love stories do. Innocent, intoxicating, and just a little too good to be true. 17-year-old Emily, name changed for privacy, was living the kind of life that felt almost scripted. A small, safe suburban town. A circle of friends she'd known since childhood. Homework, pep rallies, football games under the Friday night lights. The world, at least for her, moved in predictable rhythms. Until that night. The late summer festival came once a year, just as August began to fold into September. It wasn't anything glamorous. Local bands, food trucks, a Ferris wheel that squeaked with every rotation. But to teenagers like Emily, it was freedom. No parents hovering, no curfews whispered through a cracked door. Just music vibrating through the humid night air, neon lights reflecting in wide eyes, and the feeling that anything could happen. Emily had gone with three of her closest friends. Jenna, always the bold one, Claire, the careful one, and Lily, who somehow balanced between the two extremes. The four of them wove through the crowd, laughing, clutching melting snow cones, and trying to act older than they really were. And then Emily saw him. Daniel. He wasn't from their school. She could tell instantly. There was something in his posture, the way he carried himself. He was older, maybe 19 or 20. His black leather jacket stood out in the sweltering heat, as if he wasn't bound by the weather or by rules. His dark hair fell just right. His smile was practiced but magnetic. Emily's eyes caught his, and in that single glance, something shifted. Her friends noticed immediately. "Don't even think about it," Jenna whispered, nudging her. He screams trouble, but that only made him more appealing. Isn't that how it always works? They ended up near the same food stand, standing in line for greasy fries. Daniel struck up the conversation first. His voice was low, confident, a little teasing. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, smirking. Emily laughed nervously, insisting she was. He leaned closer, lowering his voice like they were already sharing a secret. Could have fooled me. From that moment, Emily felt the magnetic pull, like stepping too close to the edge of a cliff but not being able to step back. That night, after the festival lights dimmed and the crowds thinned, Daniel found her again. He asked for her number. She gave it without hesitation. And so it began. The late-night phone calls stretched into hours. Emily would lie in bed with the glow of her phone lighting her face, whispering so her parents wouldn't hear. Daniel's voice was intoxicating. He talked about music, about leaving small towns behind, about how most people wasted their lives never taking risks. He made her feel like she was different, like she wasn't just another small-town girl doomed to live an ordinary life. Secret drives followed. Daniel would pull up in his beat-up car, music thumping, headlights cutting through the dark. Emily would sneak out of her bedroom window, heart pounding as she tiptoed across the yard. She'd slide into the passenger seat, adrenaline buzzing in her veins. The world outside her neighborhood felt electric. Gas stations lit up like oases at 2 a.m., empty roads stretching endlessly, laughter echoing into the night. They kissed in parking lots, under bridges, down forgotten dirt roads. For the first time, Emily felt alive, like she was starring in a movie, and Daniel was the leading man. Her friends rolled their eyes, but said nothing more. After all, Emily was happy, glowing even. What harm could it do? But cracks began to show, small at first, easy to brush aside. Daniel never talked much about himself. When Emily asked about his family, he changed the subject. When she asked where he worked, he gave vague answers. He never wanted her to see his apartment. And then there were the stares. At first, Emily thought it was flattering. When she laughed with other boys at school, Daniel's eyes would narrow, his jaw would tighten. "You don't need to waste time with guys like that," he'd say. When she texted friends instead of answering his calls immediately, he grew cold, distant. Then came the apologies, the sweet words, the promises that he just cared too much. Emily told herself it was passion, that this is what real love felt like. But deep down, a small voice whispered, something isn't right. One evening in late September, Daniel took her to the lake. The air was crisp, stars scattered across the water's reflection. They sat on the hood of his car, silence stretching comfortably between them. Then Daniel asked a question that lingered in the night air like smoke. Would you ever leave everything behind? Just disappear with me? Emily laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but Daniel's expression stayed serious. His eyes searched hers, waiting. I don't know, she stammered. My family, school. I can't just. His smile returned, but it didn't reach his eyes. He leaned in, kissed her, and whispered, one day you'll see. You're not like the rest of them. It was the kind of line that could make a teenage girl's heart race. And it did. But looking back, it was also the first warning. The first thread in a web that would grow tighter, darker, and more dangerous than Emily could ever have imagined. For now, though, she was still caught up in the high. Still convinced she had found something rare, something worth fighting for. And isn't that always how these stories begin? Emily's parents weren't naive. They had raised a teenage daughter, after all. They knew the warning signs. Late-night whispers behind closed doors, sudden changes in mood, a sharp increase in secrecy. But with Daniel, it wasn't just the normal turbulence of first love. There was something heavier. Her mother noticed first. It was the little things. The way Emily's phone never left her hand, even during dinner. The way she jumped when it buzzed, answering with urgency as if silence would ignite an alarm. The way she retreated to her room, locking the door when she'd never needed to before. Her father noticed something different. It was Daniel himself. When he came to the house the first time, he didn't shake hands. Didn't offer the respectful small talk most boys used when meeting a girlfriend's parents. Instead, Daniel stood in the doorway, shoulders squared, eyes darting around like he was assessing the space, measuring it for exits. It wasn't nerves. It was control. Where do you work, Daniel? Her father asked casually, keeping his voice even. Daniel smiled that practice smile. Here and there. Mostly side projects. I'm not chained to a 9 to 5. Her father pressed. And school? College. I'm figuring things out, Daniel said, his tone edged with impatience. I don't really believe in the system. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. Like he'd already dismissed the older man as irrelevant. That night, when Emily's parents were alone, her father shook his head. Something's off. He's too smooth. What's the word, performative? Her mother frowned, folding laundry at the end of the bed. I think he's dangerous. But Emily, wrapped up in the glow of first love, couldn't see it. Or maybe she didn't want to. At first, the boundary setting seemed simple. No boys over past 10, her father said. No secret car rides after midnight. And if he wants to see you, he comes to the door, not honking from the street. But Daniel treated those rules like challenges, not boundaries. He began showing up uninvited. Sometimes at the school parking lot, leaning against his car like he owned the space. Sometimes outside Emily's bedroom window, headlights flashing in coded signals. Once, Emily woke to see his silhouette standing in the yard, staring up at her window until she opened it. Her father confronted him once, stepping outside in his slippers, voice low and firm. You don't come here without permission. Ever again. Do you understand? Daniel smirked, hands sliding into his jacket pockets. I'm not here to cause trouble, sir. I just couldn't sleep. Needed to see Emily. It wasn't an apology. It was a declaration. At first, Emily defended him. He just loves me so much, she told her mom, rolling her eyes at the constant warnings. You guys don't get it. He's intense, sure, but that's just who he is. At least he actually cares. Her mother bit her tongue. She remembered her own teenage years, the intoxicating pull of being someone's everything. But deep down, she knew intensity wasn't love, it was possession. Soon, the love that had once felt thrilling became suffocating. Daniel's phone calls multiplied, dozens a day, sometimes more. If Emily didn't answer, her phone would light up with repeated calls until her hands shook from the vibration. When she finally picked up, his voice came sharp, demanding, "Where were you? Who were you with? Why didn't you answer me?" At first, Emily laughed it off, smoothing things over. But the questions never stopped. They burrowed into every part of her life, like roots cracking through concrete. Her friends felt the shift, too. Emily started canceling plans, always with flimsy excuses. Study sessions, family obligations, headaches. But Jenna, Claire, and Lily knew the truth. She was with Daniel. Always Daniel. When they confronted her, she grew defensive. You don't understand him, she snapped. He's been through things you wouldn't get. He just needs me. But it wasn't need. It was control. Daniel didn't like her friends. He made that clear. They don't want the best for you, he muttered during one of their late-night drives. They're jealous. They'd rather see you stuck in this little town with them than moving on with me. You're better than that, Emily. Slowly, she stopped answering her friends' texts. Her world narrowed to one person, one voice, one gravitational pull, Daniel. It happened one evening in October. They were parked behind an abandoned strip mall, their usual spot. Daniel was quiet, his fingers drumming on the steering wheel. Emily had been telling a story about a boy from her math class, something innocent, a joke he'd told that made the whole room laugh. But Daniel's jaw tightened. You think he's funny? Emily blinked, caught off guard. What? Yeah, it was just. You like him? No. Daniel, it was just a joke. His fist slammed against the dashboard. The sound cracked through the silence like a gunshot. Emily flinched, her chest tightening. Then, just as suddenly, he reached for her hand, his voice softening. I'm sorry. I can't stand the thought of losing you. You don't know what you mean to me. Emily's fear dissolved into sympathy. She nodded quickly, tears stinging her eyes. I'm not going anywhere. I promise. That was all he needed. The storm passed as quickly as it came. But the crack had formed. The real fracture came weeks later. They were arguing. She couldn't even remember about what. Something small. A delayed text, a forgotten plan. But Daniel's temper burned fast, and suddenly his hand balled into a fist. He punched the wall inches from her face, the drywall splintering under his knuckles. The sound echoed, vibrating in her bones. Emily froze, her breath caught in her throat. For a moment, she thought he might actually hit her. But he didn't. Instead, he pulled back, flexing his hand, eyes wide as if even he was surprised. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice breaking. I didn't mean to. I would never hurt you. You know that, right? The next day, he showed up with flowers. A dozen roses, their thorns trimmed away. I was out of line, he said, voice thick with regret. I love you too much. That's all it is. Sometimes I don't know how to handle it. And Emily, young and eager to believe, accepted it. Because that's how it begins. The cycle, the apology, the flowers, the promises. But once that cycle starts, it rarely ends. What once felt like romance now felt like captivity. The shift wasn't sudden. It was gradual, creeping in like fog, until Emily could no longer see where the line between love and fear had blurred. It started with the car. At first, Emily thought she was imagining it. That beat-up sedan of Daniel's, the one with the dented fender and a rear-view mirror held together by duct tape, kept appearing in places it didn't belong. Parked across from the diner where she worked weekend shifts, idling near the grocery store when she stopped with her mom, cruising slowly down her street when she walked home from school. Always there, always watching. When she confronted him, Daniel brushed it off with a smile. Relax, babe. I just wanted to make sure you got home safe. But it didn't feel safe. It felt suffocating. Her friends noticed too. When they invited her out for pizza, Daniel showed up unannounced, sliding into the booth beside her, arm draped over her shoulders like a chain. When they went to the movies, he bought a ticket without asking, sitting so close he cut her off from the rest of the group. The tension followed him like a shadow. Conversations died when he was near. Laughter quieted. Eyes darted nervously, waiting for the next spark to set him off. One by one, the invitations stopped coming. Emily didn't blame her friends. She blamed herself. But the isolation worked in Daniel's favor. With each bridge burned, her world grew smaller, until it felt like there was no one left but him. By winter, Emily couldn't deny the truth anymore. She was exhausted, worn thin by the constant calls, the accusations, the surveillance disguised as love. She knew she had to end it. So one Friday afternoon, she did the hardest thing she'd ever done. Daniel, we can't do this anymore, she said, voice shaking. They stood behind the school gym, the cold air biting at her skin. I can't breathe. I need space. It's over. For a moment, Daniel just stared at her. His expression was unreadable, a storm cloud waiting to break. Then, his face twisted. Over. His voice rose, echoing off the brick walls. You think you can just leave me? After everything I've done for you? Emily's pulse quickened. I'm sorry. I can't. But Daniel wasn't listening. His voice climbed higher, raw with rage. You betrayed me. You lied to me. By now, students passing by had stopped to stare. Teachers emerged from the gym doors. The commotion grew until security had to step in, their hands firm on Daniel's arms as they pulled him away. He fought against them, screaming Emily's name, his eyes burning with fury. Emily stood frozen, her breath fogging in the winter air, her heart hammering against her ribs. She thought that would be the end of it, that once he was removed, she would finally be free. But she was wrong. That night, Emily lay in bed, trying to push the scene from her mind. The yelling, the stares, the shame of being dragged into chaos she never wanted. But sleep didn't come easily. Near midnight, she heard it, the faint rattle of glass. Her eyes snapped open. She turned toward the window, half convinced it was her imagination. But then she saw it, her curtains swaying, the pain trembling. Emily crept closer, every muscle in her body tensed. And then she saw him, Daniel, standing in the yard, illuminated by the pale glow of the porch light. His face tilted upward, eyes locked on hers. He didn't move, didn't wave, just stood there, motionless, staring. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her hand trembled as she pulled the curtain shut. In that moment, she knew this wasn't love anymore. It was something darker. From that night forward, Emily lived in a constant state of dread. Every knock at the door sent her heart racing. Every buzz of her phone carried the weight of another angry message, another threat wrapped in false affection. She couldn't step outside without scanning the street, searching for that dented sedan lurking in the shadows. She couldn't close her eyes without imagining his face pressed against the glass, watching, waiting. What had begun as teenage infatuation had twisted into full-blown stalking. And Emily, once bright and carefree, was now trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Emily's parents had been patient, far more patient than most would have been. They'd tried reason, they'd tried boundaries, they'd tried comfort. But nothing worked, because Daniel was relentless. Finally, after the countless phone calls, the uninvited visits, the screaming matches outside school, they gave Emily an ultimatum. "You need to file a restraining order," her mother said one evening, her voice firm but trembling. Her father sat across from her at the dinner table, arms crossed, his jaw set. "This isn't just young love anymore, Em. This is obsession. It's dangerous. And if you don't protect yourself, we can't protect you." But like so many victims, especially young ones, Emily was torn. She remembered the boy who once held her hand under starlit skies, who whispered promises of forever, who showed up with roses after fights. She clung to the belief that maybe, somehow, that boy still existed underneath the monster he had become. Fear battled guilt. Guilt battled love. Love battled reality. And in the end, she froze. She didn't file the paperwork. For a few days, things went quiet. No phone calls. No car idling at the end of the street. No figure standing in the yard. Emily almost allowed herself to believe it was over. Maybe Daniel had finally moved on. Maybe the storm had passed. But in reality, it was only gathering strength. It happened late on a Tuesday night. The house was quiet. Emily's parents were asleep. Emily lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her phone clutched in her hand. For the first time in weeks, her mind felt still, until the sound shattered the silence. Glass. Breaking. Her father bolted upright in the master bedroom, his heart pounding. At first, he thought it might have been the wind, a fallen branch against the window. But then came the unmistakable crash, footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving through the downstairs living room. "Call 911, he hissed to his wife, throwing on his robe as he moved toward the door. Emily's mother, hands shaking, grabbed the phone from the nightstand. Daniel had broken in through the back door, shards of glass glittering across the tile like spilled diamonds. His face was twisted with rage, his hair matted with sweat. In his hand, a kitchen knife glinted under the dim light of the hallway. "Emily," he roared, his voice echoing through the house. "Emily, where are you?" Upstairs, Emily froze in terror, her body rooted to the mattress. Her father stepped out onto the landing, positioning himself between the stairs and his daughter's room. His heart raced, but his stance was steady. "Daniel," he called, his voice deep, commanding. "You need to leave. Right now." But Daniel didn't leave. Heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. At the top, father and intruder met. For a split second, time seemed to hold still. Then Daniel lunged. The knife arced upward, glinting. Emily's father grabbed his wrist, the two men grappling at the landing. Furniture toppled. Picture frames shattered. The sound of grunts and muffled cries filled the air. Emily, paralyzed in the doorway of her room, could only watch as her father fought desperately to keep the blade away from his chest. Downstairs, her mother's voice quivered into the phone. "Please, send police. He's in the house. He's got a knife. Please hurry." For a terrifying moment, Emily thought it was over. Daniel's strength was fueled by fury, by obsession, by something almost inhuman. He shoved her father against the wall, the knife mere inches from flesh. And then, faint at first, came the sound. Sirens. Wailing, growing louder, slicing through the night. Daniel's head snapped toward the window, his chest heaving. His grip faltered just enough for Emily's father to shove him backward, knocking the knife clattering to the floor. Red and blue lights danced across the walls as police cars screeched into the driveway. The front door burst open. Officers stormed the house, weapons drawn, commands booming through the chaos. "Drop it. Get on the ground." Daniel resisted, thrashing, screaming Emily's name as two officers wrestled him to the floor. His voice cracked with desperation, fury, obsession. "She belongs to me," he howled, spittle flying from his mouth. "Emily belongs to me." Handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists. His body was dragged down the stairs, his screams echoing until the front door slammed behind him. Silence returned, but it wasn't peace. Because though Daniel was gone, the damage he left behind was carved into the walls of that house, etched into Emily's memory, branded onto her family's hearts. And Emily knew, even with him in cuffs, this nightmare was far from over. The flashing red and blue lights had faded. The broken glass had been swept from the floor. But for Emily and her family, the house never felt the same again. The night Daniel was dragged away in handcuffs should have brought relief. Instead, it left a silence that was heavier than the screams. A silence filled with what-ifs. What if the police hadn't come in time? What if her father hadn't been able to hold the knife back? What if Emily had filed that restraining order earlier? The questions haunted her. Daniel was charged with burglary, assault, and violating the no-contact order that had finally been placed against him after the break-in. In the sterile brightness of the courtroom, Emily sat just a few feet away from the boy who had once whispered love into her ear. He wore the same confident smirk, even in shackles. When the judge read the charges, he didn't flinch. When Emily's statement was read aloud, her voice trembling as she described the fear, the stalking, the night of the break-in, Daniel only stared at her. Not with shame, not with regret, but with the same twisted possession that had fueled his obsession from the start. He served time, but for Emily, the sentence wasn't measured in months or years. It was measured in nights spent double-checking the locks, in the flinch that came every time she heard tires screeching on asphalt, in the nightmares that pulled her back to that moment on the stairs, her father struggling against the blade. Some wounds don't heal when the gavel falls. For a while, Emily withdrew into herself. She avoided places she once loved. She stopped answering texts, even from the few friends who still reached out. She felt marked, as if everyone could see the girl who had fallen for the wrong boy, the girl who had let danger slip past her front door. But slowly, something changed. It began with a counselor at her school, who gently reminded her that what happened wasn't her fault. Then came a support group, where Emily sat in a circle of other women who had lived through the same cycle. The charm, the control, the explosion, the regret. There, she realized she wasn't alone. And when she found her voice again, she used it. Emily began speaking publicly, first in small classrooms, then at larger community events. She shared her story in stark, unpolished detail. The butterflies at the festival, the red flags she ignored, the way passion twisted into possession. She spoke not to frighten, but to warn, to remind others, especially young girls, that love should never feel like a cage. Her courage gave strength to others. Victims came forward, their stories spilling out after years of silence. Parents began listening more closely to their daughters' whispers. Teachers took notice of the warning signs. Emily's pain had become a beacon, but her story was far from isolated. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 3 women will experience stalking or abusive behavior from a partner in their lifetime. 1 in 3. Behind those numbers are faces, friends, sisters, daughters, each carrying scars the world may never see. And the research is clear. The most dangerous time isn't always during the relationship itself. It's when the victim tries to leave. That's when obsession becomes desperation. That's when love mutates into violence. Emily had survived the break-in, the knife, the trial, but many do not. Years later, when Emily looked back on the girl she had been, the 17-year-old who thought danger looked exciting in a leather jacket, she wished she could whisper to her younger self, "Pay attention to the cracks. Listen to your instincts." Love should not hurt, control, or suffocate. But she couldn't change the past. What she could do was change the future, for herself and for others. Her story stands as a chilling reminder. What begins as a whirlwind romance can spiral into obsession, violence, and tragedy. Emily survived. But survival is not the ending. It is only the beginning of a different kind of fight, one to reclaim your life, your voice, and your freedom.